Welcome to the Next. I'm the host, Jason Jacobs. This show sorts through the nuances of athlete development through the lenses of a dad who's trying to sort through those nuances with my own kids, and also as an entrepreneur who's in the early stages of building my next company, which is a new kind of athlete development company focused on hockey first. Today's episode is with Coach Luke Strand. Luke is a seasoned coach whose journey spans collegiate, junior, and professional hockey. He's currently the head coach of Minnesota State. He's in his second year. His first year, they posted an 18-5-4 overall record and dramatically improved in year two, 27-9-3. They captured both the McNaughton Cup and the Mason Cup, advanced to the NCAA tournament, and he was honored as the CCHA Coach of the Year and a finalist for the Spencer Penrose Award, which is the National Coach of the Year. Coach Strand was nice enough to come on the show, and we have a really fantastic discussion about his journey in the sport, about his evolution as a coach, since he does things a lot differently today than he did when he was first starting out. We talk about data and analytics, as well as technology and how they're increasingly infiltrating the sport. And we also talk about the state of the sport, the path for emerging players, and of course, how to optimize player development, both as a player, trying to navigate your own journey, and as a coach.
Okay, Luke Strand, welcome to the show.
Thank you appreciate this.
Wow, this is such a weird one for me because, first of all, I've only been, my show started before I figured out what I wanted to do next, and then I figured out in the last few months what to do next, and then the content started getting more hockey focused, but it's really only been a couple months that I've been having hockey guests on the show, and I haven't had a D1 head coach yet, and you're not only a D1 head coach, but I think you guys are like 13th ranked program overall. I mean, you're a formidable program. You were CCHA Coach of the Year, and I posted an episode, and then you liked it on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, and then I was like, man, he's an important coach, and you followed me on Twitter. I was like, why did you follow me on Twitter? And I just slipped in your DMs and invited you on the show, and to my shock, you said yes. So I guess my first question for you is just, how the F did you find my little show, and why did you say yes?
Yeah, I'm always interested to see what's out there, take a nugget from what I can and hear what I do. And the big part, there was a little excerpt on Achieve Technologies, which I'm extremely familiar with, and Doc McGregor and I are friends, and they did an excellent job. So that was probably an eye-opener, and then at that point, onward.
Well, I'm so grateful for you making the time. And the other caveat I want to say up front is that, I played the game growing up, but I feel like I'm learning it for the first time now, given how much the game has changed. And the other thing is that my oldest is 13. So I'm sure when you get interviewed, you're used to getting interviewed by, people that cover Minnesota hockey for a living or things like that. And I'm just a dad. So I just want to be upfront about that. And so I'll be inquisitive and ask a lot of questions, but if I ask any dumb ones, that's probably why.
No, it's terrific. I'll tell you, it's a sport forever. It's a lifetime sport. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. It just doesn't. It matters how much they love it and enjoy it. So whatever I can do to help.
That is one cool thing about it too. It's just so leveling as well. It's once you get in the rink, it doesn't matter anything that's happening outside of the rink, whatever background you come from, whatever you like. I have parents that I've been buddies with for years, and not once have we ever talked about what do we do for work? Nobody cares, in the rink, it's just you're in the rink. So I guess my first did you ever respond to that before I jump in?
No, it's just, hockey's time. The parents' commitment, the player commitment, the time commitment. But I truly do believe that's what makes hockey pretty special. The idea that commitment and that passion that it takes to get it done. You don't find people that are being successful in the game without it. You just don't.
Well, my first question for you is, how'd you find the game? And how'd you fall in love with it?
Yeah, Wisconsin, living and growing up kid, oddly enough, I was born in the Philippines, Air Force brat. So then we moved to Wisconsin. Older brother played, probably couldn't ditch me fast enough. I just hung on to whatever they were doing. We lived across the road from an outdoor rink, and it was kind of the only rule we had as a kid was when the light went on outside the house, it was time to come home. from the rink. And that's what we did. It felt like the outdoor rinks were always going in November. They'd last until maybe February. And I don't really remember missing a day or any of the opportunity to be just farting around on the rink, being around older kids, learning the game through your eyes, experimenting. And pretty soon it was organized, and pretty soon we're really blessed with great youth coaches that just instilled that same philosophy, the passion, the practice. They made practice hard, but fun.
I know from my research that you were a multi-sport kid, a big baseball guy as well. If I remember, were your parents athletes, and what kind of guidance did you get from them in terms of guidance slash pushing? What was their philosophy when it came to sports?
No, I mean, there wasn't a lot of sport. Dad, I think, did some speed skating on the river type thing and played outdoor, nothing organized. And Mom was she'll be 92 here coming up at the end of August, which my father's passed away for a while now in 1999. But what they were unbelievable, they were backers. They were my biggest fan. They were, sure, did they push you? Because if you're committed, you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. Yes. Were they forcing the idea of, we're just active kids. And like I said, if there was probably it was my brother who was, like I said, 5 years older. So everything they were doing 5 years ahead, I want to be able to do at my age. That was that deal. And I'm sure they got plenty sick of me. They tried to ditch me a few times and run me through some bushes and other opportunities that they could to lose me. But it was just, that's what we did. We played sports. You weren't inside. We didn't really have video games. We didn't, we enjoyed our outdoors. We enjoyed our hunting, our fishing, but man, we were on the ball diamond, a football field, and a hockey rink nonstop.
I also read that when you were a little guy, I think you had to write for school or something, what you wanted to be when you grew up, and you put either fireman or coach. I mean, it turns out, obviously, one of those things happened, but what was your journey like as a player? And I mean, from a young age, it sounds like you had coach aspirations, but how did those intersect, and when did they intersect, the coaching and the playing?
Yeah, at grade 5, that was the paper I wrote. Obviously, at grade 5, that would have put me 11, 12 years old. Usually kids at that point are aspiring, like, I want to play in the NHL. I was like, I want to be a coach. And I could tell you this, the reason why I want to be a coach is I had unreal youth coach. Didn't matter the sport. In baseball, Bob Kane, Jim Howe, unbelievable, knowledgeable, passionate. They were dads of buddies of mine, but they're really good in the sport themselves. Football, we had Bill Brim was a high school coach who was so good to us as kids. We got to be around the high school football field, and it didn't matter if we were picking up pads. It was a big deal. And then, youth, Mark Fauneth, his brother Kenny, and those guys, and Steve Chapin, Dennis Fox. We were just
Love
really
you remember all these names, by the way.
Oh, man. That's why, I can tell you, that's what their influence was on me to want to do this. I mean, P.K. O'Hanley was my Bantam coach, my junior hockey coach. We later go on and win gold medal together in World Junior Select. So it's just, I was really forced. So I think the fact that I wanted to be a coach was influenced because of the people that were around me already being great coaches to me.
When you think about what it takes to be a great player versus what it takes to be a great coach, how much overlap is there, and where do the differences lie?
It's a tricky one for me. I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of talented players that went on to be really talented coaches. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of guys that didn't make it maybe as players. That I think the trick there is we observed the game through a different lens. Even when we were playing, we were watching maybe players with star power and figuring out what they were doing, or vice versa. If you didn't have star power, you're figuring out a way to still impact games and make a difference. So, and then you found out, I think, a lot of the, I bet you find a lot of coaches that were captains, leaders. They were being molded younger in their careers, even as players that will later go influence how they become a coach. But there's not many players that get out of the game. I think they're all pretty shocked about the amount of time it takes as a coach versus the amount of time it takes as a player. The coaching time is way more immense than the player side.
Well, I've also heard you talk about how different your coaching style is today versus when you started coaching many years ago.
I mean, There's times where I feel bad for guys like, nah, I don't feel bad. I mean, yeah, I do. I feel bad for guys that I coached maybe early because I was maybe not as far along in the relationship business as I was. Like the knowledge was easy. That part of hockey is, I think any sport is easy. It's the belief in the relationship business that now is at a high priority. That when you do that, I think you're constantly working on trust, and you're trying. We just move at the speed of trust. So you're just always trying to bridge those gaps in between performance and people.
You mentioned a bunch of names when you talked about the coaches that influenced you along the way. I'm curious, do they all have similar coaching styles, the ones that influence you the most, or are they wildly different?
Oh, I would say most wildly different. I mean, my high school coach in hockey was Tom Kuklinski, who was hard. I'll never forget. I love the man to death. Today, when we see each other, it's like he's a father to me now. At the time, you're like, I don't care if this guy, I ever see this guy again in my life. But the second you're done, the life lesson reverse mode comes in, and I think you're just so fortunate. And that's, I think, a lot of our coaches, they were blue collar guys that worked, that demanded a standard to be kept. And I think when you're a young player, it doesn't matter now or then, you probably didn't understand the love that was going into it as much as you knew the sweat, you knew the tear part of it, but you didn't understand the love part of it. Now, when you put on shoes now as a coach, if you're not coaching with love and passion, I don't think you last.
And I mean, it does feel to me like the uh, coaching has evolved quite a bit. I mean, you hear the term thrown around like old school coach, right? And I mean, to me, the old school coach was like, yelling and screaming and barking and kicking trash barrels and breaking sticks over the bench and bag skate till you puke and stuff like that. Do you feel like there's still a place for that style in the game? And similarly, I don't know why I always ask my questions in twos, but do you feel like there are tenets that all great coaching has in common, or are there many different ways to skin a cat?
There's probably a little bit of different ways to skin a cat. I think some of the things you spoke of as far as the rant side of life and that side, I mean, we grew up, we did things because like we were told to. Now there's a huge, the why is everything. And I think when you've got a standard that you want to keep and you've got a demand that you need to have to keep that standard, if you've got the trust and if you've got the love and if you've got the passion from the player because you've relayed that them to first, I think you're going to succeed. It used to be tough love. I mean, that was like the big comedy. Oh, it's just tough love. I think you have to love tough. I'm opposite now as a coach. Like they have to know that what they're in for is going to help them not only now, but success later in their life. Then I do think at that point, they'll do a lot of things that are probably out of their comfort zone to want to be better people, better players.
Coach, I've also heard you talk about how I think the danger, and I'm going to not word it quite right, but the danger in not keeping things simple, right? So how do you think about the balance between keeping things simple and being a student of the game, being a student of training, being a student of mental performance, being a student of nutrition, being like, because if you're a student of all these things, it's not really keeping it simple, right? And so, yeah, how do you balance like mastery and excellence with simplicity?
Failure, I think that's part of it. I think you've got to fail forward. You've got to fall down. You've got to get back up, and you've got to not, there's the old, it's a great book if you're a reader. It's called The Twin Thieves, but fear of failure, fear of judgment. You've got to let kids fail. You've got to teach them how to not fail. Don't get me wrong, but they're probably going to skin their knee. It's not going to hurt them to fail forward. It's going to encourage them, hopefully, if you handle it the right way. On the simple side of things, our room, like when we get here as a staff and we're around hockey buddies, like we get together as hockey. You can get pretty deep in down a rabbit hole as staff members and peers. But I think when you've got to go out and present it to, you better have a very clear, concise manner that allows room for, I'm into messy practices. We're not going to be the sexiest practice team in the world. We're not. I know I'm gonna ask our guys to do things that aren't comfortable enough to be straight clean all the time. You're hoping that the messy turns cleaner and cleaner as it goes. But the first dose of it, we're going into the season now. We're going to get into entries and breakouts immediately, man. And there are going to be some grenades thrown around the rink instead of clean play. It's going to happen, but we have to go through that growth moment to get out on the other side. So, and I think on this simple side, though, for me, it's just if I want the guys to do things faster, stronger, harder, with more intent, the simple path has got to be available for them. Otherwise, they'll think themselves into a corner.
Given that, how do you balance in planning with reading the room and reacting as you go as a coach?
That's a great question. You got to be you can't be stubborn as a coach. Times where, you put your coach hat on and you're like, we're going to get this done today, no matter what. It might not be the day for it. No matter what your plan was, the guy's plan, the eyes of the room, the mannerism, the temperature of the room, I would consider it. There's a lot of talk out there like coaches were thermostats, like we get to set it. So whatever they're capable of, you got to find that edge for me. And it might not be everything you want to get done today. That's all they had in their tank, but you better have a plan to recover from it as a coach. And you better have a plan that is very clear for the player, because I think when those two match, then you're in a really good place.
And I think similarly, you've talked about how every kid is different and you got to get to know them as people, and they have different, they're going to respond to differently. So some you might be able to call out in public, whereas others you want to give them a warning privately that it's coming and stuff like that. So I think my question there is, on the one hand, you've got this storied program that has a brand, that has a culture, that has values, that stands for something, and keeping that consistency of brand across the team, recruits, alumni, current players, form everybody. It's like, this is the team way, right? Versus everybody's different and everyone needs to be treated different. And so I guess, how do you balance that kind of consistency of standards with that personalization that you've discussed in the past?
Oh man, it's fair versus equal. I mean, that's just where we're at with sport. I think that you got to have that put out there. It's not always going to be the same. I think if I went back to the twin thieves of fear of failure and judgment, I've got a job to prepare. If we're going to watch a video and you're not going to succeed in that video, in my eyes, maybe in your eyes, you did succeed. So I better figure out what you're feeling on this. For my education, maybe in your mind, it was the right play. Maybe in the team game, it wasn't the right play. But if I go in there and just blast out this is how we do it, I think we're going to go backwards as a group, because no one's going to who wants to make a mistake when all it does is show up on the bulletin board? That's going backwards in my world, in my mind. Now, if you want to keep repeating the same mistake over, then there probably is a huge disconnect between either philosophically or individually, or, coach to player to coach. But as far as the other side of it is, the standard's a standard. The standard's a standard. I'm all for individuals inside of, it'd be like me having a ranch. Like, I can't have all the same horses on the ranch, but they're all inside the same fence. So can you let the player be an individual and have individual skill for team value? That would be the number one thing, and they hear it pretty constantly. I don't want to take the stick out of their hands. Same thing. It's paintbrush. I don't know who told Picasso he was a good painter. I don't know if someone did, or if he just kept experimenting and going and going. So we got to get that experimentation. You've got to get that failure. You got to get the idea that you need to practice your individual skill, but we have to have team value with how we play and what we do together.
I've been having some fascinating discussions on the show with some coaches. So, for example, I had Freddie Meyer, who is the Rivers head coach and played in the NHL and was 4 years at BU and an All-American, and just sent 3 kids from his Rivers team to the NTDP. But for him, he talks about how important it is to keep the game fun, and if it isn't fun, it's defeating the purpose. And oh, by the way, not only is it defeating the purpose, but you're not going to get the best out of the kids. And so all of his practices are centered around fun and joy. And yeah, they battle, they compete, they're held to high standards, but he's all about keeping it fun, when I think about what it takes to be a Division I college player in a storied program at that, and how the road is getting so much harder, and there's scholarships and there's NIL, and it's in some ways it's becoming a business, right? At what point does it switch from something that should be fun to it's a job, bro? If you don't perform, like you don't make the cut. Like where does fun fit in for you, and where doesn't it fit in?
It's good. There's a crossroads. I mean, guys in the NHL are playing for a contract. They're playing for a paycheck. They're paying for taking care of their family, but they're going to go out and have fun doing it. They're more likely to succeed when they are having that. So, I think, in his case where they want to have fun and fun's a factor, if you can be as competitive as you can be and still have fun. Can you manipulate a scenario where it's a fun scenario, but it's still going to get you better and it's still going to be competitive? There's still going to be a winner and a loser, but there's still going to be a joy that you get out of it. I do think that's our job as coaches, to find that sweet spot, no matter the level. We keep competition points here day to day. Every day you're up, there's points on the board. If you're in purple and you guys win a small area game, like, you're going to get a point. And if you're in gold and you won 2 games that day and the other team, anything we did for points, you're going to get a point. At the end of the month, we'll take collection of who's got the most points. And there's a time where the guys don't look at the practice plan. They look at what points are on the line that day. And that's kind of where it's at. So I think if you're getting the athletes that want to become players, that really want to come, they're going to find joy in competition. They're going to find joy in the sweat and the work as much as they're going to, it's not all laughing and giggling. Fun can be a lot of different other, I think, avenues besides that side. It's more fun to be treated the right way and go to a hard than is treat someone poor and have them go have fun. That's not going to work. I think it's the opposite way. Hopefully your job is to make them feel like they can do anything because you treat them the right way.
Back to the personalization versus standards thing, I would imagine that being a D1 college player is more or less a year-round pursuit. And obviously there's, breaks and recharging and all that, but the expectations are, and I want to hear from you, but they're, probably just as high or almost as high in the off season as they are during the season itself. How do you think about, again, standards and formula, and here's the plan we're going to follow in the off season as an example, versus each player kind of finding their own way, and some grinding and some not, and some doing more on ice and some doing more off ice, and some doing more cross training, and, others working on their edge work, right? Like, how much structure and guidance is provided? And also, how do you think about balance, overuse injuries, burnout, and how much do those factor into the plan?
I think we like our similar formula. They're here. We have got our guys here for 7 weeks in the summer. Kind of the July 4 kind of splits it in the middle. They would have had, let's say, 4 to 5 weeks off prior to when school was out to when we report, and then they'll have another 4 weeks off before they report back to school. So I do think there's a mix. I think the summer is about the individual. I think the summer is about individuals. Can we make you a better player? Can we make you a better person in the summer? The framework of workload, the framework of sweat equity, we talk about spilling sweat here all the time. That framework is going to exist. There's no question. But if you've got more to do with your power index, it's got to go up because of where you're at in your physical maturity or
is that
injury.
an achieve metric? The power index?
Achieve will generate part of it, that's for sure. But we want to make sure that when we report back and we get going, that the best version of you is available. I think that ownership that you take in the summer of your own, how much better you can get in the summer, that ownership is on you. We'll put the framework out there. We can all go in the gym. We both can go in the gym for the same amount of time. Somebody can come out of there with more work done than the other. We can do the same exercise for all I care. But someone's intensity inside of it's going to get more done. And I think that's standard for us to keep up with your peers and the peer pressure, which I think is so important that the peers they're all doing it. I think that's where you make some diamonds in the summer and the off season where guys can come back and flip the switch and be a different version, a better version of themselves.
When you look at the standard that these Division I college players are held to, how do you think about that standard trickling down to the youth level? What elements of that standard are relevant as you go down the chain and get to the younger players, and which elements are too much too soon? And how would you know as a coach? How do you know as a mom or dad? How do you know as a player? I think that's, I mean, speaking personally with a 13-year-old who's my oldest and feeling my way in the dark as he's coming up in the game, it's pretty confusing.
The number one standard, if I was a youth coach, I would keep no matter what, is time matters. If you're late, you don't care. For me, if you're late, you show a lack of something and there's some other avenue you're thinking about doing. Time is a standard that it either writes the passage for passion and it writes a passage that you want to get better, or it's showing a story that's just not important to you. That standard of time, I mean, that's a huge part. I would tell you that I think the standard of a younger player wanting to get better, they're all going to, I think it's easy for people to look at they look at their buddy, and whether their buddy might be, 20 pounds heavier already and 3 inches taller. I mean, you got to be, for a coach and a young and a parent, I think if they can keep a standard of time, standard of love and passion, and they got to be good dudes. There's a lot of good players that aren't good people that aren't going to last very long. There's a lot of good people that aren't quite the player that will become a better player because they're good kids, they're good dudes, they want to learn how to get better. And that other standard would be coachable for me. They got to be coachable. They got to be able to take instruction, criticism. I think they've got to learn how to, and the parent has to learn how to shut their mouth at the right time. Let the kid enjoy the journey a little bit. Don't correct them before. Go back to that skin the knee thing. Like, they got to fall down to skin their knee as a kid. They just do. And then, but I think being coachable is a really huge attribute for a young athlete to learn. And that doesn't mean they have to just learn it from, if it's hockey we're talking about, it's not just a hockey coach. That was the best part about growing up for me, playing multiple sports, was multiple coaches, was multiple philosophies, was multiple ideals, multiple, demands. I think it really taught you to be coachable because of, you weren't just getting one voice, one direction. It was being spread onto you. Time, love of the game, and being coachable. Man, I don't know what would stop somebody from really taking off.
You hear some people talk and they say, oh, this player or that player, from the time they were a little guy, they were always playing G levels up. You just knew from the time they first put skates on that they were going to be someone great. And you hear from others that who cares who's great when you're X age, because it all changes anyways. Like, they haven't gone through puberty, checking hasn't started, girls haven't come into the picture, distractions haven't come into the picture. You don't know what they're going to want. You don't know how their body's going to grow. None of it matters. You have views when you're, when you're watching the younger players, like, how young is too young for you to even try to understand? And what are the things you look for, and at what age where you start kind of taking notice and following along?
Yeah, I bet you the successful player, though, has some attributes that could find their way through puberty, that could find their way through, their attributes of being coachable, their attributes of trying things. And I think, when you get into hockey, if we're talking hockey specifically, are they willing, like, I could keep being the same way, or can I experiment and get better? These kids now, the hockey IQ part, if it can match up with skill and ability, it takes some, you got to watch the game. If there would be one wish for kids, it would be to go watch more sports, like actually go to a hockey game and don't just be busy in line and Snapchatting, versus like actually observe and take in. And maybe we were forcing as kids, we didn't have that maybe as a distraction, but you'd go to a baseball field, you'd watch a player like play third base the right way. You'd watch a player attack a pitch the right way. Now, half those things are missed because they're farting around on their phone versus maybe dialing in. So I think they've just got to be around it. And I would tell you, I wouldn't discourage the kid that's behind maybe, or in somebody's mind behind. I think those probably need some encouraging, but I would be a very subtle reminder to the kids are ahead for a reason. If you want to stay ahead, just some things you got to get done.
When you think about recruiting, what are the things that are necessary for the potential recruits to have already? And what are the things that if they don't have, it's, oh, I care less if they have that, because as long as I'm confident they can get it, then I can work, we can work with them to develop that aspect of their game.
Man, character. I mean, I would do some digging on people and kids, and I know it's an old thing to say, but like the janitor, the teacher, the find out like how they treat people. It's a really good measuring stick when we find how kids treat their parents, how that interaction is usually a pretty good tell. And compete. I'll use a story. So this is maybe Sioux City 2009, 10. We draft Jake Genzel. Gens is a runt. He's a Woodbury Bantam, going to get drafted in the USHL. He didn't really draft Bantams at that time. His father, Mike, was actually the coach at Des Moines. I remember calling Mike saying, I'm going to take Jake with the next pick, like just for a heads up. So I take him. And the reason why is I had seen Jake be the small brother to Ryan and Gabe, be the most competitive kid, didn't matter because he was smaller by a lot. He was a small Bantam player. His competitiveness to be the best player, a rink rat with an IQ that was just flat out competitive. I mean, I don't care if this kid gets an inch bigger, he's gonna be better. If this kid gets 3 inches bigger, watch out. And those I think are the things when you start to watch kids. You always hear the parent, that's out there that's kind of, they call BS on the kid that's pretty rough and tumble and competitive as a young guy, and they're like, I don't really like little Johnny because he's dirty. Well, is Johnny really dirty or is Johnny just really competitive? It's hard to teach compete when you get that mannerism about you as being a competitor. You want to surround those people with other competitors. And I think that does rub off on people. A competitive person, not to be that way, but I do feel we can make somebody a better skater. We can make somebody a better passer, a better shooter. It's hard to make better IQ and hard to make better competitors. So those are early attributes you try to look for.
How do you think about things like size and age?
If they're getting closer to me, like us, like we've got Alex Zetterberg here coming in. Zetz is a 5'8", maybe 5'9". If we had a whole bunch of 5'9ers, maybe I'd worry about it. But if we've got enough balance and size, then I think we're good. I think when you're talking size and age, I mean, there's this guy out of Florida named Marchand who like is a absolute. He's a rat. I mean, obviously he still plays so hard, so competitive. He's such a usable player. When you watch him play in bigger moments, he's even a better player. But someone along the way couldn't count out his size because he obviously kept doing things over time that mark a champion and mark a winner. So I don't really get caught up in the whole size. There's that old, it's the size of the heart, not the size of the man type thing. So I think you got to find that balance.
So one question I have, I don't come from the coaching world, but I come from more building companies. And in building companies as a founder, there's different philosophies. On the one hand, there's the founder, it's, founder as dictator. And it's, if you have too many chefs in the kitchen, it's going to dilute the outcome. It's going to slow you down. It's going to create more bureaucracy. Like, like founder's hand should be in everything and founder veto is a thing. And then there's other founders whose philosophy is much more of hire people that have the founder mindset themselves and get out of their way and let them run. How do you think about your coaching philosophy to stick with that analogy? And is there a right and a wrong way to think about that if you're trying to coach a winning or storied program?
Yeah, if it went to hiring coaches, for me, it's people, you're hiring right people. There's probably some sort of, I hope there's enough of me that rubs off on what happens and how we do things and why we do things. And there's enough philosophical share, but at the same time, you hire people you trust. You hire people like, I'm so crazy fortunate to hear like Keith Paulson, my assistant, first vehicle I ever drove was their vehicle. Is take my kids to the rink, use our truck when you need to. Troy Ward was a long time. He believed in me before maybe a lot of people did as a coach. Now he's here with me on staff. Corey McCracken. It didn't matter. I got the right people around me. I thought that was really important. I think you hire people to do a job, and sure, do I have some things that I believe in that we're going to do? Yeah, but are there things that I'm a lifetime learner that you got to keep curving and doing? I truly would say yes to that part. And then end of the day, if you, I mean, your job is like hire people that can do the job. If I was to, I want to hire head coaches. I want to hire people that could sit in the chairs, handle the seat. Like the heat of a head coach chair is different than the heat of a assistant coach chair. So fortunately for me, like all of my staff have been head coaches before. It doesn't really matter the level, but they've been head coaches. That makes my chair a little bit, because there's times when we can look at each other and they'll make the comment like, well, that chair is different than my idea is in this chair. Your idea is coming from that chair. There's a balance there. So I think on the founder side, like the ownership side that they have and the ownership side that they take, it's really important. It's a shared deal. If it goes the other way, then I'm probably doing it the wrong way for me.
So back to my little tech startup world, there's debate about, as AI makes things more efficient and automates more things, on the one hand, it makes people's efforts go further, takes grunt work off their plate, makes companies more efficient and profitable. And on the other, takes jobs, right? Or at least some jobs. When you look at some of the changes that are happening, so if you look at like the Canadian major juniors, and it seems on the one hand, it is making sure that the best talent ends up playing at the Division I level, and therefore it will grow the strength of the talent and grow the game. If you're a U.S. company, maybe it makes for a tougher road. How do you think about the changing landscape and the harder road? And do you see it as how is it a good thing? How is it not a good thing? And also for whom?
I don't think any two paths are the right thing for you. Might go play for X, I might go play for Y, and it could be the best decision for you and best decision for me. And sometimes I think people right now are chasing the idea because you will play for X. Well, if you do, I'm going too. Well, that doesn't make it right or perfect for me as it would for you. So I do think I think the opportunity to the player pool to expand and be good. I mean, everyone's talking about how it might hurt the American player. Why don't we see like it could make our American player better, because there's going to be some more opportunity and big picture of things. There's more junior opportunity. There's more. I think if you really want to be the American player, that there's probably going to become a little more determination that's going to happen. I mean, for me, I've seen enough to say that wherever you land you got to make good of that spot, and that it might be right for you and wrong for someone else, or vice versa. And your job to be there is to take advantage of what's given to you and what you're earning. So, I mean, the landscape is, I'm sure, continue to change, evolve. If I was a parent of a young lad that was doing those things, a lot of fact checking to make sure. And I think just because it didn't work for somebody doesn't mean it's not going to work for you. And because it did work for somebody doesn't mean it's going to work for you. But it's going to be a grind, man. There's no elevator. The elevators are out the door. I mean, this place is, we all want to win. We're like, who am I to say? We're going to play against college teams that have, if I use the word salary cap for the right reason, we're going to play against teams that have a way larger salary cap than we do. But our job is to go beat those teams. So we got to find the right dudes. What's that? Is that Moreland that said it doesn't matter how many soldiers live, matters who. So get the right guys.
So we've got about 12 minutes left. A couple other topics I want to try to sneak in if we have time. One is just that, I mean, hockey has a reputation for being a bit tech resistant relative to some of the other sports, whether it be baseball or soccer or others. Do you think that reputation is warranted? And if so, how are you seeing that changing? And similarly, I'd love to just hear a bit on how you think about technology at Minnesota State.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm a nerd. Like I'm into this. I mean, day to day here, if you can't use Excel, you're going to be in trouble. I know that part. I think there's a lot of number balance to what has to happen. For example, I mean, all this companies we use, Fast Model's got a great platform for some practice things, some designing things that we utilize them for. We use Exos with our video, like stream and video editing. There's lots of great programs out there. There's lots of great companies, Sports Code, Exos. Like there's just the numbers 49ings become a big thing.
Just had Mike Jamison on the show, actually. I haven't shipped it yet. He's their head of sales. He's the director of hockey ops at Northeastern. I don't know if you
Yeah.
must him.
And there's some really good things. I think if there's a stubborn part of technology that I'm still into the hands-on, like I'm not into the numbers that get generated by someone that I don't believe in and I don't know. If we're going to talk scoring chances, like I believe what we consider a scoring chance to be a scoring chance. What some AI generated scoring chance to be, can't say I agree with them. There might be some I do agree with, but there's going to be some I just don't. So I think you got to find anytime you use any of these analytic numbers, the consistency is what it is. Information in, information out. So if the information in is not consistent, then how can you ever balance the information that comes out and say it's the same? You know, we use a company called Benchmetrics. Bench is a way for us to collect a lot of data. Again, same thing it's information in, information out. If you're inaccurate putting it in, you're going to get squiggly numbers on the way out. You don't want that. I'm a huge fan of Dr. McGregor and Achieve. For me, it's the next level of what has to happen. I mean, we use it for practice planning. We use it for player performance. We use it for tracking trends. I've been fortunate enough to use it internationally where you're at a short track event and it really told me a story, freshness and readiness for players, recovery for players. We're very in on that part. And then there's platforms for us to, gain more video. Is it Flow? Is it Instat? Is it Sport Logic? Is it different things that I think can bring more information into your hockey world, into our office? So all that said, a lot of that happens behind closed doors to the players. I don't think they need to watch all the video we do. I think when we find something that's a pattern, they need to find out about it. And
I remember your quote. It was like they fear the needle, not the doctor. Did I get that right?
everyone's afraid of the needle, not the doctor. When you go to the doctor, it's fine, but they pull out the needle full of information. You're like, oh boy. And that's been an experiment. I think you got to find a balance of meeting size, meeting information, duration. There's that old death by meeting thing. We do meet our share here, but I think you can meet more if you meet with less duration.
So my last question is, we really haven't talked much about Minnesota State, and you inherited a program that had been transitioned quite well from a coach who was in the role for quite a long time and had a great run. I'd love to just hear about that transition. Like when you came in, was there a period where you intentionally did nothing and just learned? When you started making changes, like where did you start? What things did you keep consistent? What things did you put your own stamp on? Just like, how did you handle that? Because you've even taken it to a new level. And I think for any of the coaches out there, and for me, who's not a coach and is just really curious about it, it's just a fascinating case study that would be hugely valuable to get inside your brain, since you, from a distance, have done such a great job managing that transition and taking the program to the next level.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I mean, I think one of my staff, that's a big part. When I got the job, I would tell you Mike Hastings and his staff were phenomenally, this place was pretty equipped in a good spot. Like they'd done a lot of foundation work. His staffs over time, from Darren Blue to Nodder to just all the way through, seamlessly grown. So that part, they left that in a good spot. It's everybody's job, I think, to leave the cupboard a little more full, a little better spot than when they got it before. So they definitely did on that side. I interviewed the players that had played here. That I was very heavy into that, like what they liked, what they loved, what they'd get rid of. I wanted their input. I wanted, if they like something, what they like. If they love something, why they love it. And if they want to change something, do they have a suggestion what they would have done different? Or is it just, it didn't work? Because you do get that point. I think you get some guys that are like, time out, I didn't like that. But other guys did, because it maybe didn't work for that person. It wasn't like a whole blanket. So I think you had to be a little bit aware about that part. But that took a lot of inventory as far as what was here. I think it took some time internally. I was unbelievable. Scott Rideout stayed, our equipment manager, who was in charge of equipment. Matt Schmidt stayed, who was in charge of human performance, our athletic trainer. Those two stayed, and they had tons of nuggets. They had tons of things that, in their rooms, and I think it doesn't matter the level, in their rooms, there's a lot of conversations that happened that they've got good intents. They listened to what they need to. So they shared some really vital pieces of information. I was fortunate enough, I had some former players of mine that had played here prior to me getting here that already had served me some things along the way. Because when I got the job, it was pretty bang. People were quick to acknowledge that. I had a couple of teammates of mine back in the day that played here that we played junior hockey together. I thought that information was good. And then when I got the job, Alex Tracy, our goalie, Trace was here as a goalie. We had won a Clark Cup together in Sioux City in the USHL. He had a lot for me. Brendan Olson had played for me in Sioux City. Those guys had a lot to say. The first thing I did was I brought in players that had played for me before to help me. I think it probably swayed the pendulum culturally pretty quick because those guys, it was pretty easy to see who guys would say, what's Strand going to do about this? Or what's it going to be like tomorrow after we won or lost or whatever. So I thought those guys did a really nice job about putting up some expectations. And then our doors open up here. I know every coach says, oh, my door, I have an open door policy. And some people have an open door policy that's a crack open, that's really not open, that's actually open. Ours are very actually open. So I just think relationship building was so big. And then I was fortunate that first summer when I got the job here, it was, it had happened in April. School was ending. I'd hire a completely new staff, a new strength coach. And I went out and got people that I knew, believed in. Brett, my strength coach, is a star, and he hadn't been in this position before. And he had a lot of growing to do, but was willing to be coachable and learn and wanted to get into it. So I thought that as a whole, but I would tell you then the bottom line here in Mankato, Minnesota, the community backing, the community surrounding, I think the people that were in place, Hasty done an unreal job with probably getting the right players on the chessboard to be involved. Now it was like, I need to listen to them too, because they have great ideas. They're in your shoes. They're business owners. They're founders. They're passionate people that have other passions just besides Maverick hockey, but Maverick hockey is part of what they believe in. So to listen to, I think, a lot of that, and you can't find for me, you can't find a good coach that's not probably a good listener. The ones that probably are not going to last might be the underlying factor. And so it was just a combination. And then, fortunately hired a director of hockey operations because everyone had taste. He's kind of like Mike had taken a lot of people with him when he left here to go to Wisconsin. As he built up his closet of people here, like he took them with him. And it's hard to say why that you wouldn't do that. It really can mean you want to hit the ground running, bring people to know what's going on with you. So I was fortunate when the deck cleared that, Tyson Sauter, our hockey ops, he had been around here, helped out a little bit, but everyone's like, hiring him for it. He's not ready for that role. Or is he the right teachable guy that really isn't the right guy for that role? So we've been fortunate. It takes a village of people. But I think when we changed that feeling, I think Mike had a good standard about how they did things. And there's definitely things you wanted to add and subtract. And I can tell you this, when we got here, like, I didn't change around here. I mean, I put up what I believed in standard and culturally, got the walls and things, but you don't build a culture because of sign on a wall. So, but I kind of left a lot of things the way they were because they had gone the good way, but I really dug into the people that have been here.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Coach. And yeah, amazing job. And I think that's going to be really helpful too, as I said, for any coach who is walking into a similar situation. Last question. I've never asked this before, but this is the first. Maybe it even becomes a standard depending on how this goes. But if you could wave your magic wand and change one thing about the sport, what would it be and how would you change it?
At this level in college?
You choose. Could be college, could be sport overall, just whatever comes to mind. What would you change?
I think it's such a flowing manner. Like times have changed the game. If you went to the game of hockey, I love that the pace has gone up. I love that the integrity of hockey is kind of pretty much stayed intact inside the boards. I wish college wore visors. That'd be something for me. I wish we did more masks. That would be helpful. I think just policing the game a little bit. I think you'd have a little different flavor of game at times. If I had a wish, I'd say college. I think college hockey should play 40 games, not 34. I think we could manage that with still having academic and graduation expectations and still finding that it's the longest sport on campus. So I do think there's probably room for some more game side of things. Love the idea where our guys are I think you used to find college hockey was a place where guys went and got a degree and then they're kind of out of the game. Now you're finding this is a major breeding ground for a player to be a pro. And that part, the more influence that has, I think the more better players are just instilled into the game and the programs. It's so healthy. And then lastly, I mean, I hope I don't know if the NCAA ever figures it out and whatever, but I think there's got to come a point where there's a salary cap, but there does. And if people really don't want that, then you're going to find a
Salary cap
different
with the NIL, you mean?
Yeah, just in like a program has to spend, and that's what you spend. That's it. If you can make your room special because you spent your money on that, great. That's great. But as far as player procurement goes, I just think you can't have unrestricted free agency and no salary cap and make something be sustainable. Like it's difficult. So I hope we can find a balance of that. And there's probably room for some NCAA expansion in our sport, which I hope happens. I think if we got a few more games, a few more clubs out there, hope NCAA tournament field gets a little bigger because that opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament is pretty special to him.
Okay, well, Coach, this was such a fascinating and far-reaching discussion. I'm so grateful for you making the time. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words for listeners?
No, just, we're grateful. I think the sport, the more attention, the better the job that gets done about it, the better spot it'll be. And so thank you for having me. Look forward to more episodes out of you and more guests and that I can learn from as well.
Thanks again, and best of luck in your upcoming season.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Next. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, and you haven't already, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast player, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or any of the others. We also send a newsletter every week on the journey itself, the new content that we publish, the questions that we're wrestling with, how the platform itself is coming along that we're planning to build for player development, and where we could use some help. And you can find that at thenextnext.substack.com. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.